Welcome to this video. Have you ever heard the story of Ishmael, the forgotten son of Abraham? Join us as we explore the life of one of the most intriguing and often overlooked figures in the Bible. Get ready to discover the journey of Ishmael, the son many ignore, yet who played a crucial role in God's divine plan. In this video, we'll reveal the details of Ishmael's life, from his origin as Abraham's firstborn to his time in the desert, where God made powerful promises to him. You'll learn how Ishmael's story offers deep lessons about purpose, rejection, and God's faithfulness, even in the most difficult situations. This journey will expand your understanding of Abraham's fatherhood and Ishmael's legacy, which still resonates today. Curious to see how Ishmael's story can impact your spiritual life? Want to uncover the hidden promises and lessons in his journey? Then stay with us and dive into this powerful narrative, which promises to bring new insights on faith, resilience, and God's purpose for each of us. Let's uncover the full story of Ishmael together. The story of Ishmael begins with the desire of Abraham and Sarah to have a child. God had promised Abraham that he would become the father of a great nation, but as the years passed, Sarah remained childless. This led to frustration and doubt. In an attempt to fulfill the promise in their own way, Sarah suggested that Abraham have a child with her servant, Hagar. At the time, it was not uncommon for a man to have children through a servant if his wife was unable to conceive. Sarah hoped that through Hagar, they could finally have a son. Hagar, Sarah's Egyptian servant, played a significant role in this story. After Sarah's suggestion, Hagar became pregnant with Abraham's child. This child was Ishmael, the firstborn son of Abraham. For Abraham, Ishmael represented the fulfillment of God's promise, at least initially. Abraham loved Ishmael deeply and believed that he would be the heir through whom God's covenant would continue. However, Ishmael's birth also created tension and conflict within Abraham's household, as Sarah began to feel resentment towards Hagar. Despite the tension, God had a specific plan for Ishmael. In Genesis 16 verse 10, God promised Hagar that her son, Ishmael, would be blessed and that he would become the father of a great nation. Even though Ishmael was not the child of promise in the same way as Isaac, God assured Hagar that Ishmael's descendants would be numerous and that he would have a significant role in the future. This promise from God gave hope to Hagar and showed that Ishmael was not forgotten or neglected in God's plan. Ishmael's name itself carries meaning, as it means God hears in Hebrew. This was a reminder to Hagar that God had heard her cries when she was in distress and that he was watching over both her and her child. This name symbolizes the care and attention God had for Ishmael, even though he was not part of the primary covenant line through Isaac. Ishmael's story is one of God's faithfulness, even in difficult and complicated circumstances. The birth of Ishmael also marked a significant moment in Abraham's journey. Although Ishmael was not the child through whom God's ultimate covenant would be fulfilled, his birth was a step in the unfolding of God's broader plan for Abraham's descendants. Ishmael would go on to live a long and impactful life, and his descendants would form their own important lineage. His birth showed that, while human plans might differ from God's, every life has a purpose in the divine story. In summary, the story of Ishmael's birth highlights the complexities of faith, family, and God's promises. While he was born out of human effort to fulfill a divine promise, Ishmael's life was still deeply intertwined with God's plan. The promises made to Ishmael demonstrate that God does not abandon or forget anyone, and that even those who seem to be outside the central story are still seen and cared for by him. The birth of Isaac marked a turning point in Abraham's family. After years of waiting, Sarah finally gave birth to a son, Isaac, as God had promised. This was a moment of great joy for Abraham and Sarah, as Isaac was the child through whom God's covenant would be fulfilled. However, Isaac's arrival created tension in the family, especially between Sarah, Hagar, and Ishmael. Isaac was now seen as the heir of Abraham's promises, and this shift in focus led to growing jealousy and conflict. Sarah began to feel increasingly protective of Isaac and worried about Ishmael's presence in the household. Though Ishmael was Abraham's firstborn, Sarah no longer wanted him to share in Isaac's inheritance. Tensions between Sarah and Hagar, which had started when Hagar became pregnant, grew even stronger. Sarah felt threatened by Hagar and Ishmael and demanded that Abraham send them away to protect Isaac's future. This conflict caused emotional strain in the family and put Abraham in a difficult position. Eventually, Sarah insisted that Hagar and Ishmael be expelled from their household. Though this was a hard decision for Abraham, God reassured him that it was the right choice and that Ishmael would be cared for. Abraham, torn between his love for both of his sons, reluctantly sent Hagar and Ishmael into the wilderness with some provisions. This moment was painful, as Abraham had to trust that God would fulfill his promise to Ishmael and watch over them. In the desert, Hagar and Ishmael soon ran out of water and faced the prospect of death. Desperate and afraid, Hagar cried out to God. In response, God heard her cries and sent an angel to comfort her. The angel reassured Hagar that Ishmael would not only survive but also thrive, reminding her of God's earlier promise that Ishmael would become the father of a great nation. This divine intervention showed once again that Ishmael was not forgotten by God, despite being sent away. God opened Hagar's eyes to a nearby well of water, saving both her and Ishmael from dying of thirst. This act of divine provision was a turning point in their journey. Ishmael grew up in the desert, becoming a skilled archer and later the father of 12 sons, who would go on to form their own tribes. The story of Hagar and Ishmael's survival in the wilderness demonstrates God's care and protection, even in the most challenging and seemingly hopeless situations. In conclusion, the tension between Isaac and Ishmael and between Sarah and Hagar led to the separation of the two brothers. While Isaac would inherit the covenant promises, Ishmael's story continued in its own path, shaped by God's promise to make him a great nation. Despite the difficulties and conflicts within the family, God's faithfulness to Ishmael ensured that he and his descendants would have their own legacy and place in history. Ishmael, like his half-brother Isaac, became the patriarch of a great nation. While Isaac was the chosen son through whom God's covenant with Abraham would be fulfilled, Ishmael was not forgotten by God. God had promised Hagar that Ishmael would become the father of a great nation, and this promise was fulfilled through his descendants. Ishmael's legacy is significant, as he became the leader of a large and influential people, marking his place in history as a patriarch. Ishmael had 12 sons, and these sons went on to form what are known as the 12 tribes of Ishmael. These tribes became powerful and established themselves in various territories, especially in the region stretching from Egypt to Assyria. The Bible records the names of Ishmael's 12 sons in Genesis 25 verses 12 to 16, showing that each son became the founder of a tribe. These tribes lived in independence, separate from Isaac's descendants, and became well known for their strength and resilience. The tribes of Ishmael occupied regions in the Arabian Peninsula and surrounding areas. Over time, these tribes developed their own cultures and identities. The Bible describes Ishmael's descendants as living in the wilderness, skilled in archery, and maintaining their freedom. The spread of Ishmael's lineage across the Middle East reflects the fulfillment of God's promise that Ishmael would be the father of a great nation, a nation that would grow and thrive on its own. Ishmael holds particular significance in the Islamic tradition. In Islam, Ishmael is considered a prophet and the ancestor of the Arab people. Muslims believe that Ishmael played an important role in the construction of the Kaaba in Mecca, alongside his father Abraham. This connection to Ishmael is central to Islamic belief, and many view him as a key figure in their religious and cultural history. Ishmael is honored as the forefather of the Prophet Muhammad, linking him directly to the foundation of Islam. In Islamic teachings, Ishmael is seen as a symbol of faith and obedience to God. The story of Ishmael's near sacrifice, though differing slightly from the biblical version where Isaac is the child of sacrifice, is an important part of the Islamic tradition. This event is commemorated annually during the festival of Eid al-Adha, a significant celebration in the Islamic calendar. Ishmael's role in this story highlights his faithfulness and the importance of submission to God's will, which are key themes in Islam. In conclusion, Ishmael's legacy extends far beyond his lifetime. He became the patriarch of a great nation, the father of 12 tribes, and an important figure in both the Bible and the Quran. His descendants shaped the course of history in the Middle East, and his place in the Islamic faith highlights his ongoing significance in religious tradition. While often overshadowed by Isaac in biblical narratives, Ishmael's story is one of strength, resilience, and divine promise. In both Judaism and Christianity, Ishmael is often viewed as a significant but secondary figure compared to Isaac. In the Bible, Isaac is considered the son of promise through whom God's covenant with Abraham would continue. Isaac's birth is seen as a miraculous event because Sarah was well beyond childbearing age, and God's promise to bless the nations through Abraham's descendants is fulfilled through Isaac. However, Ishmael still holds importance, especially as the firstborn of Abraham and the one through whom another great nation would arise. He is respected but not given the same level of prominence as Isaac. In the Islamic tradition, Ishmael's role is much more central. He is considered a prophet and an ancestor of the Prophet Muhammad, making him highly significant within Islam. According to Islamic teachings, Ishmael helped his father Abraham build the Kaaba in Mecca, the most sacred site in Islam. Muslims honor Ishmael as a figure of faith and submission to God, and his legacy as the forefather of the Arab people connects him directly to the foundation of the Islamic faith. His role in the Islamic tradition is as crucial as Isaac's role in the Jewish and Christian traditions. The comparison between Isaac and Ishmael highlights both the similarities and differences in their stories. Both sons are children of Abraham, and both are considered patriarchs of great nations. However, while Isaac is the child through whom the covenant continues in the Bible, Ishmael is seen as the father of a separate, equally important lineage. The division between Isaac and Ishmael symbolizes the branching of two great peoples and religious traditions, Isaac's descendants leading to the Jewish people and later Christianity, and Ishmael's descendants leading to the Arab nations and Islam. In religious symbolism, Isaac is often seen as representing the fulfillment of God's covenant, while Ishmael represents the idea of God's care and blessing for those outside the direct line of the covenant. Even though Ishmael was not the child of promise, God's protection and promises to him show that no one is outside the reach of God's plans. This symbolism reflects the inclusiveness of God's blessings to all people, even those not directly part of the chosen lineage. For Jews and Christians, Ishmael is a reminder of God's promises being extended beyond the main narrative of Isaac. Ishmael's story demonstrates that, while God's covenant with Abraham would continue through Isaac, God's blessings were not limited to only one son. Ishmael, though separated from Isaac, still carried forward a legacy of his own, which plays an important role in the broader story of humanity. In conclusion, Ishmael is a key figure across Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, each viewing him through different lenses. While Isaac remains the central figure in the Jewish and Christian traditions, Ishmael's legacy as a prophet and the father of the Arab people gives him great significance in Islam. The comparison between the two brothers highlights how their stories symbolize the diversity and breadth of God's promises across different faiths. The story of Ishmael teaches us important lessons about strength and resilience in the face of adversity. Despite the challenges he faced, being sent away from his father's household and growing up in the wilderness, Ishmael survived and thrived. His ability to endure hardship and grow into a strong leader reminds us that difficult circumstances do not define our destiny. Instead, with faith and perseverance, we can overcome even the toughest challenges. One of the key messages from Ishmael's story is that God's promises to him were fully realized. Although he is sometimes viewed as the forgotten or lesser son compared to Isaac, God did not abandon Ishmael. God promised Hagar that her son would become the father of a great nation, and that promise came true. Ishmael's descendants formed 12 tribes, and his legacy lives on. This reinforces the idea that God's promises are sure, even when we might feel overlooked or secondary in the larger plan. Ishmael's story also teaches us about the inclusiveness of God's blessings. While Isaac carried forward the covenant, Ishmael was not left out of God's plan. His life shows that God has a purpose for everyone, regardless of their position or circumstances. This message is relevant to anyone who has ever felt sidelined or unimportant, reminding us that God sees and values each person individually. In today's world, Ishmael's story can inspire us to reflect on our own struggles and the challenges we face. His resilience in the desert, growing up far from the comforts of his father's household, is a powerful reminder that faith and determination can carry us through the hardest times. Ishmael didn't let his situation limit him. He rose above it to create a lasting legacy. In the same way, we are all capable of rising above our challenges to fulfill our own unique destinies. The fulfillment of God's promise to Ishmael also highlights the importance of trust in divine timing. Even when things don't go as expected, and even when life seems unfair, Ishmael's story shows us that God's plan is always unfolding, sometimes in ways we cannot see immediately. It teaches us patience, faith, and trust that God's promises will come to pass, even when the path is difficult. In conclusion, Ishmael's life offers us powerful lessons about strength, faith, and the fulfillment of God's promises. Though he is often seen as the forgotten son, Ishmael's story proves that no one is forgotten in God's eyes. His legacy reminds us that each person has a place in God's plan and that with faith and resilience, we can overcome adversity and fulfill the purpose we are meant to achieve. In this video, we've explored the life of Ishmael, from his birth as the first son of Abraham to his role as the patriarch of a great nation. We discussed how Ishmael's story unfolded, the challenges he faced, and the promises God made to him, which were fully realized through his descendants. Despite being seen by some as a secondary figure to Isaac, Ishmael's journey is filled with resilience, strength, and a legacy that lives on today. Ishmael's life offers valuable lessons about faith, perseverance, and the fulfillment of God's promises. Often overlooked, his story is rich with meaning, reminding us that even those who may seem forgotten are never outside of God's plans. His strength in adversity and the way he rose to become a leader of his own people demonstrate that no one is without purpose or value in God's eyes. As we reflect on Ishmael's life, let's remember that his story is not just about survival but about thriving despite the odds. His legacy continues to inspire, showing that every individual has a place in the larger story of faith. Whether you're familiar with his story or hearing it for the first time, Ishmael's life challenges us to rethink how we view those who might seem secondary in history but play a critical role in God's plan. If you enjoyed this video and found the story of Ishmael inspiring, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more in-depth explorations of biblical figures and their lasting impact. Give this video a thumbs up if you appreciated the insights, and leave a comment sharing your thoughts on Ishmael's journey. What did you find most surprising or meaningful about his story? Thank you for joining us on this exploration of Ishmael's life. Stay tuned for more videos that dive into the rich histories of other important figures. Let's continue learning and reflecting together on the many ways these ancient stories still speak to us today. Until next time, keep exploring, stay inspired, and remember that everyone's story, just like Ishmael's, has a place in the larger tapestry of history.